Thanks everyone for coming to tonight's show. This is Julia Anderson with Real Talk. For Black History Month, we are going to give little-known historical facts about, well, Black history. Sitting in our chair tonight is Dr. Stephen Miles. Welcome to our show, Dr. Miles.
Thank you for having me here.
Tell us a little about yourself.
I have a PhD in history with an emphasis in sports history.
And who are you going to talk about today?
I am going to present to you boxer Jack Johnson.
Please continue.
John Arthur Johnson, known as Jack, was born on March 31, 1878 to Henry and Tina Johnson in Galveston, Texas. One of 6 children, Johnson left school after a few years to get a job on the docks to help out with the family finances. He started boxing as a sparring partner and fought in something called battle royals, where black fighters would fight and white spectators would throw money in the ring to the winner.
Sounds like Roman gladiators.
Boxing has been likened to a gladiator sport. Fights were sometimes scheduled for 45 rounds.
Lord, they were trying to kill each other.
In 1897, Johnson began fighting professionally. Johnson's style was one of a counter-puncher, laying in wait for the opponent to make a mistake. In Johnson, this tactic was considered cowardly and devious. But just a few short years early, Gentleman Jim Corbett used the exact same tactics. He was the cleverest man in boxing.
Wow, interesting.
At that time, it was rare for white and black boxers to fight each other in championship fights. They could fight only in competitions. In 1908, Johnson, after beating all black challengers, chased the white champion, Tommy Burns, around the world, teasing, taunting, and begging for a fight. It took 2 years for the fight to finally happen. Jack beat Burns in 14 rounds on a technical knockout. That fight led to race riots around the country. The championship was not considered legitimate because the real champ, Jim Jeffries, retired undefeated. It also started the Great White Hope search for someone to beat Johnson. Johnson fought every Great White Hope put in front of him, often in exhibition matches. Jeffries came out of retirement saying, "I feel obligated to the sporting public at least to make an effort to reclaim the heavyweight championship for the white race. I should step into the ring again and demonstrate that the white man is king of them all."
I guess that was the thinking of the time.
The fight took place on July 4, 1910, with 20,000 people in attendance. Johnson beat Jeffries in 15 rounds after Jeffries' corner stopped the fight to prevent Jim from getting knocked out. Jack was paid $65,000 for the fight. And while black folks celebrated the win, race riots broke out all over the country. Yes, seriously. In 25 states and over 50 cities, there were riots. 23 black people and 2 white people lost their lives. An untold number of black people were injured or stopped from being lynched around the country by the police.
Unreal. I bet the death toll is probably not true either.
But that isn't the end of this fight's legacy.
It isn't?
The fight was filmed for distribution, and was seen all over America and internationally. Because Jack won, Congress banned prize fight films from going across state lines in 1912. The ban was then lifted until 1940.
What? You're kidding, right?
Remember, there was no cable or pay-per-view. People listened to the fight on the radio. The movement to ban the fight was started by a Christian lobby and some police forces. It began 3 days after the fight. Many states even banned the film exhibitions from showing the fight. Jack was one of the biggest celebrities of his era. He was brash and taunted people. He wore the best clothes and drove the fanciest cars. Johnson had a propensity to date and marry white women, which was both morally wrong for the time and illegal. His first wife, Etta Terry DeRio, was a socialite. Jack's abusive behavior and her depression led her to take her own life. His second wife, Lucille Cameron, divorced Johnson after 12 years of marriage. His third wife Irene Pinot was with him until he died. On October 18, 1912, Johnson was arrested for violating the Mann Act, which forbid the transporting of women across state lines for immoral purposes. The fact that the act was into law when Jack married Cameron didn't matter. Any white woman who dated a black man was automatically considered a prostitute. After being convicted and sentenced to a year and a day in prison, Johnson and Cameron fled to Europe. They lived there for 7 years.
Just for being in love.
Holding the title for 5 years, Jack was defeated by Jess Willard in 1915 in Cuba. Jess used Johnson's tactic of being the counterpuncher, forcing Jack to attack. Johnson was knocked out in the 26th round. The fight was scheduled for 45 rounds. Tired of running, Johnson came back to the United States on July 20, 1920, and was immediately put in prison. While in prison, Johnson invented a tool that would help tighten of loosening fastening devices. He called it a wrench.
Talk about using your time wisely.
After getting out of prison, Jack opened up a nightclub in Harlem. 3 years later he sold it to Oni Madden, who renamed it the Cotton Club. On June 10, 1946, Johnson died in a car crash in Franklin, North Carolina. He was 68 years old. President Obama, at the urging of Senator John McCain, sports writer Peter King, and documentary filmmaker Ken Burns, signed a pardon for Johnson in 2009.
There are similarities between what Johnson went through and what Muhammad Ali went through. When these boxers couldn't be beaten in the ring, suspect legal procedures were used to stop them from fighting.
Correct. Ali was stripped of his titles because he refused to register with the Selective Service. Johnson was convicted of a crime that wasn't a crime when the act occurred.
Thank you, Dr. Miles, for this presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
I want to thank you all for coming to the show. This is Julia Anderson with Real Talk. Bye-bye.